I'm an architect by training. I studied at the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. My father is Palestinian from Jaffa, so in 1948 we became refugees. My mother is Damascene, so I was born in Damascus. But I grew up as a refugee from Palestine in Jordan. So, and I lived between Amman, Damascus, Beirut, a little bit of Cairo. I graduated, my high school was in Cairo, so that's why I feel I belong to the area really. I don't belong to one place. But for those of you who remember, maybe you're too young to remember, in 2002, Sharon reoccupied the occupied Palestine and imposed a curfew on many of the Palestinian villages and towns. He imposed the curfew in Ramallah for 42 days. He imposed the curfew in Nablus for 96 days. Can you imagine, 1/3 of the year you're not allowed to even step out to this courtyard. And Arafat was imprisoned in his muqata'a. And if those of you remember, he was bombarded. And I happened to have a mother-in-law, Hamati. And my mother-in-law lives alone, and she was 91 years old at that time. She was living alone, and as a result of the bombardment, she was alone in this house for 12 days. She didn't have electricity or water and nothing. And I was living on my own. My husband was away. After 12 days of trying to reach my mother-in-law, to bring her to me, I managed to bring her to my house. And I must tell you that since that day, there were two occupations in my life. One outside with the Israeli army, and one side inside, one with my mother-in-law. And I never wrote in my life. I want you to know that I am a little bit dyslexic, so nothing, I imagine being everything in life except a writer. But believe me, the occupation of Sharon, the difficulty of spending 32 days under curfew, and having my mother-in-law nagging, when do we want to have breakfast, how do I boil the milk, what do I do? I mean, she just kept nagging to a point where she drove me completely crazy. And whenever she went to bed, I would sit down on my internet, on my email, and start sending email to my niece who's your age, because she's a reader, and I mean, she's crazy, a little bit crazy like me, so we have a good time, she and I. And I told her, Diana, please don't share these emails with anybody. And I shared them with an Italian friend of mine by the name of Luisa Morgantini, who happened to be the Vice President of the European Parliament. And next thing I know, Luisa says, can I distribute these emails to all the European members of the Parliament? I said, Luisa, are you crazy? No way. This is talking about my mother-in-law, how I hated my mother-in-law. Next thing I know that the emails got into a Filtrinelli, a publisher I didn't even know how to pronounce the name Filtrinelli. And I got a phone call from this crazy publisher saying, we want to have all words rights. I had no clue what words rights were all about. I said, what do you want? He said, words rights. I said, I don't know what he's talking about. He said, Suad, all languages. We want to buy all languages. I said, all languages are for sale, but not Arabic. I don't know why. All of a sudden I became very nationalistic. I sold them all rights except Arabic. And that's why the book was published in 18 languages, and the last language, number 18, was Arabic. Anyway, that produced Sharon and my mother-in-law. And this book is a gossip book. I think in this book I figured out that people like gossip, they like talking about their mother-in-law, they like to, this is a very, very mundane book, and I never realized that, people got to know about Palestine through the story of my mother-in-law, through the story of my dog, and what have you. So thanks to Sharon and my mother-in-law, I produced this book. We can talk about it more. Then I have another book that not many people know about because it was just published in India, and it's called Menopausal Palestine. Like women, Palestine is in menopause, is in a serious crisis. And menopause, as you all know, you're too young, but I'm sure you have menopausal moms who are acting a bit strange, a bit nervous every now and then. Palestine is this. This book was triggered by the conflict between Hamas and Fatah. I belong to the PLO generation, I belong to a very secular generation, and it was very difficult for me to accept, I must admit to you, to accept that Palestine was the first Arab country, or maybe the second after Algiers, to elect a Muslim fundamentalist party, and it broke my heart in many ways, because as I told you, I am a secularist woman. And so anyway, this book is about my women friends who were active with the PLO, and it's a book that is oriented toward the West, because I felt now with the election of Hamas we're going to go through another cycle of stereotyping who the Palestinian women are, who the Palestinian or the Arab women are, who the Muslim women are, and what so on. So this book is about the life of 10 of my Palestinian, or not Palestinian actually, my friends who have to be Palestinian by heart and not by nationality. And I am here to talk about this book, but I can never have a short story. I must always start from a long story. This book was really triggered by the building of the wall, the concrete wall, the separation wall. If you ask any Palestinian today to give you two traumatic experiences or dates, everybody will tell you 1948, when 800,000 Palestinians were kicked out of their homeland and became refugees, and my family happened to be one of them. And the second fact that is really very harsh for us to accept is the building of the concrete wall. The concrete wall, the Israelis have this security word, which is, it's for everything. They kill us because of security, they take our land because of security. It's just the one word that they pretend. Now, this wall is, as far as I'm concerned, really is one of the international crimes that happened in Palestine. Not only because of the destruction it did for the economy. Just to give you an idea, this wall is a 18-meter high wall, and it's to build that wall. So far, the Israelis have bulldozed 1.5 million olive trees, which is 12% of the olive trees that we have in Palestine. And as you know, it's a big agricultural economy. So that wall ended up pulling out 1.5 million trees. That wall prevented 150,000 Palestinians from reaching to their work. As you know, the Palestinian economy is very much dependent on an Israeli economy because of 43 years of occupation. So there are 150,000 Palestinian young men who go and work in Israel, which if you take a Palestinian family of 5 members, then you have 1 million people lost their jobs as a result of, again, Sharon deciding in the year 2000 that he doesn't want to have any Palestinians coming and working in Israel. This book is about a Palestinian worker. His name is Murad. Murad is only 21 years old, and he had worked 7 years of his life, which is 1/3 of his life in Israel as a worker. And one day he finds out that he cannot get there. And one day Murad came to work with me in Ramallah in my garden. I made him coffee, I made him tea, whatever I make him food, I just find it on the side, he doesn't eat it. So I said, Murad, what's wrong with you?